Dr. Patrick Muraji, Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It gives me great pleasure to join you today at the start of the Nairobi Online City event as part of the Afro-Asia Fintech Festival. I hope you're all doing okay. It's difficult times, but I'm also honored to contribute to the theme of this year's event, which is on people and talent harnessing collaboration in pursuit of resilience and growth post-COVID-19. It goes without saying that we are meeting against the backdrop of the COVID-19 global pandemic that has exposed the vulnerability of African economies on several fronts, including the fragility and weaknesses of Africa's industrial, but also technological capabilities. Many countries are facing a crisis, are already saddled with debt, are unable to access markets, risk instability because of rising youth unemployment. And there is a huge reversal of development gains that have been made over the past decade. Growth projections suggest that the continent will contract in 2020 by 5.4%, even though a recent Bloomberg article just came out saying that particularly in East Africa, countries like Kenya, countries like Uganda, countries like Ethiopia will still be among, hopefully, the 10 fastest growing economies on the continent, including Cote d'Ivoire as well in West Africa. So there is still some hope, but the challenges remain. Even though they will be the fastest growing economies, they will certainly be coming down from the big numbers of 8, 9, and even 7% into maybe 6, 5, and 4%. So we're nowhere near where we will need to be if we wanted to get to Agenda 2030, creating a prosperous Africa with less people living below the poverty line. African middle-income countries and emerging markets that were performing well before the crisis with stable macroeconomic fundamentals are struggling today, even those that are growing fast, to access market liquidity to ensure that they can continue the huge infrastructure projects that they were undertaking, the huge job creation projects that were on track to ensuring that they will meet the SDG goals, but also, and more importantly, create prosperity through jobs. The economic impact of COVID-19 has resulted in a significant loss of jobs. We know that on the continent every year before COVID, we were supposed to create somewhere in the order of 13 million jobs just to catch up with the number of youth that were entering the job market. This number is said to go up somewhere between from 13 million to 16 million, so 3 million more people that are unemployed now will be looking for jobs. 60% of the unemployed will now be on our continent. The informal sector, which accounts for 85% of employment on the continent, as we know, is the one that has been the hardest hit. So we will also need to find ways of ensuring that, one, we can formalize more of that informal sector as we build back and build forward. And that is going to have to be through technology again. We have seen the crisis threaten to drive many people in the formal and informal sector into employment. Remittances have contracted. And I think that is why this conversation today is particularly important, because in many of the sectors that were job-creating sectors on our continent, there is now a question of how do we build back forward. In a country like Kenya, where we are virtually gathering, tourism was an important part of the economy, but tourist arrivals are down almost 91% since August. This does not mean that tourism has to end. The question is, how do we use online tools, how do we use online services to be able to respond and build resilience as we begin to look at building forward better. And maybe we can do more, maybe we can do better, maybe we can even create more jobs in this new context as we begin to think of how we need to innovate to respond to the crisis. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, what this crisis has done is bring us together in this Africa-Asia Fintech collaborative platform. We hope that as we begin to talk, I think that we talk about the resilience of African economies, but clearly East Asian economies have been particularly resilient, and there is a lot that we can learn from what is going on in East Asia. What is the talent that the East Asian economies, particularly economies like actually some of the smaller middle-income economies in East Asia, have done fantastically well in managing this crisis. So how can we learn from what's going on in the Asia fintech space to see whether we can bring some of those things onto the continent to ensure that as we learn together, we can begin to build forward in a way that works. We have already had some Asia-Africa conversations. For example, we had a conversation at the Economic Commission for Africa with the Jack Ma Ant Financials company, discussing what were the new businesses, what were the new services that emerged as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. And clearly what they saw was that a lot of the businesses that were already ICT linked, ICT connected, were doing much better. A lot of services that people need have moved on to a lot of the technology platforms. So we need to understand what we need to do better to ensure that Africa also moves to the technology platforms. This is clearly a way also of addressing the informal sector. As we move to more ICT platforms, we become more formal. Africa's fintech is probably one of the most advanced of digital areas, with Africa and Asia regions leading the financial inclusion space. The sector is expected to contribute somewhere in the order of 150 billion to Africa's GDP between now and 2022. And so having this conversation about how we harness that 150 billion is an important conversation. In 2017, the mobile ecosystem, which supported about 3 million jobs, contributed 14 billion to funding of the public sector in the form of general taxation as well as sector-specific levies on consumption of mobile services. There are now about 640 tech hubs across the continent that host entrepreneurs and attract investment in digital services across the continent. Venture capital investments in African startups is estimated at about 1.3 billion in 2019, with fintech and payments accounting for more than 51% of this activity. Financial technologies are transforming the financial services industry, particularly in Africa, where 66% of Africa's citizens still lack any kind of access to formal banking, but where also 46% of world money market transfer takes place. So we can do better. We have started some of the platforms that we need, but the question is, how can we ensure that we do better and we build these fintech companies on the continent in a much faster space, but that we also build open and shared platforms that can work together. According to Ernst & Young, the number of fintech firms in Africa has recorded almost a sort of a total average growth of 24% over the past 10 years. Countries like Liberia, Ghana, and Kenya are supporting this growth. And of course, we know that Ghana is one of the leaders in the fintech space, and we hope again that policies that are being put in place can ensure that this growth in fintech will continue. Again, we need to understand what is Asia doing, how is Asia doing it in terms of what is the policy space that we need to improve to ensure that Africa can take its rightful place in the fintech space. When we talk about technology, we know that there are three things that we need. First of all, it's all well and good to talk about fintech, it's all well and good to talk about the potential of fintech, but if we do not have the three basic things that we need to make fintech work on the continent, we will never succeed. The first one, of course, is access. We need a lot more of our population to have access to technology. That means that we need to reduce the cost. I think when we look at the continent today, yes, we continuously refer to the same set of countries. Of course, Kenya is one of them, Rwanda, South Africa, Ivory Coast to some extent, Tunisia and Morocco are countries where access to ICT is higher than in the rest. But even in those countries, where we have access, cost still remains quite prohibitive for a large numbers of the population. So again, it means that it becomes even more difficult to be able to see how people can use those platforms in a way that is economically viable or that the services are attractive. And so we do need to look at, what is the cost component? And then finally, it's the broadband speed. And of course, we cannot do any kinds of credible fintech services on a platform that is incredibly slow. So I think this combination of access, cost, and then broadband capacity and speed really underlie the conversation around what we are having today. Is what are the enablers to make sure that we can get to where we want to get to in a way that assures that we can get a lot more people onto these platforms. The second thing that we will need to do in terms of enablers is, of course, energy. We cannot talk about ICT, we cannot talk about fintech, we cannot talk about this whole space without ensuring that people have reliable, safe, and affordable access to energy. 40% of the whole technology sector is about having accessible, reliable, uninterrupted energy. And so again, I think that conversation about how we can ensure that as we talk about fintech, we are also talking to the energy providers. And Kenya is, of course, one of the leading examples of renewable clean energy on the continent. It has managed and succeeded in attracting a lot of private sector investment into the energy sector. And that link between the energy sector and the ICT sector, I think, demonstrates itself very well in Kenya, where we have been able to leverage good investments, accessible and affordable investments in the ICT, in the energy sector, to build and grow a strong and robust ICT sector, and hence fintech services that are doing very well. The other thing that we can build off of is this weekend, the leaders and the heads of states of the continent are beginning to prepare for the coming into effect of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. This is going to require a lot of logistics when Africa starts trading with itself, when Africa starts trading from Algeria to Zimbabwe, from Benin to Djibouti, in terms of, what are the supply chains that we need to build? How are we going to work through this? What kinds of payment systems? Afro-Asia, for example, is developing payment systems which will allow our currencies to trade easily with each other. And so the different architectures around which we can build a robust and credible fintech environment, we believe are beginning to be put in place. A lot more work is needed, but we think that with what is happening, a year ago, the Economic Commission for Africa with the African Union came together to put the African digital strategy, which lays again, and I think a lot of the work that we need to do to take advantage of this 1.3 billion market that we stand to gain from is really harmonization. It's one thing to talk about, fintech in Rwanda and the development of fintech in Rwanda and all the development of fintech in Kenya, but it will never really reach its full potential if we are not able to harmonize systems to be able to. And one of the things I always talk about is the fact that M-Pesa is so well known across the world, but it's not as well known, and we don't have any M-Pesa platforms in West Africa. We have no M-Pesa platforms in Southern Africa, and certainly no M-Pesa platforms in North Africa. I think this is what we hope that we can do as we open up the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and harmonize some of our processes, so that legal processes, legal systems, if the business is doing well in East Africa, in Kenya in particular, that it should be able to access the markets in Egypt, in Zimbabwe, in Angola, and all the way down to South Africa in a seamless way. That, I believe, is what is going to lead to an explosion of the fintech space on the continent, and ensure that, what are today good, innovative, but almost still pilot ideas become sort of market leaders across the continent. And that's where we want to end up. We want to move from an Africa that is an Africa of small initiatives to an Africa of a few unicorns, where we create, 3 or 4 global businesses that would have, maybe seen their birth in the Rift Valley in Kenya or someplace else on the continent. So I think this is why the conversations that we're having today between Africa and Asia on, first of all, the talent, and that is, an important part of it is what kind of youth do we need to have? What do we need to prepare? What kinds of schools? What is the curriculum that would allow us to create the youth that are needed to then build a technology generation, that build a fintech system, a fintech services industry that works? One of the big impediments to growth on the continent has always been, even when we are able to attract FDI, even when we are able to create continental companies, there is always a scarcity of the right talent. And so we do need to, while we talk about 13 million kids looking for jobs, there is on the business sector side the continuous constraint of not finding the right kinds of skills that match the needs of the businesses. As we get into this new service sector era, as we begin to look at, what are the skills that are going to be needed to make the CFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, a reality, we will also need to look at what is our curriculum. We will need to look at what kinds of skills we are developing amongst our youth, so that they can take advantage and claim some of the spaces that are going to be opening up, both in the fintech area, but also in the overall ICT sector. There again, I think we can look and we can learn from Asia, see, what was the talent pool that was needed, that they created, and what did they miss? so that we don't have to make the same mistakes as they have done, and ensure then that we can leapfrog ahead of that process. I think we have an immense youth, the innovative capacity in our youth is incredible. We also need, as we talk about fintech, to begin to look at issues, and this is some of the issues we will be looking at as we move into the second phase of the African Continental Free Trade Area agreements, the whole issue of property rights, to ensure that our innovations are protected, to ensure that we can actually create value and wealth that stays on the continent because of the innovative capacities. And so I think we do need to work together, and I must commend Kenya and the government of Kenya for all the work they've done in leading a lot of the opening up of digital services and digital payments, and ensuring that we have a regulatory environment that allows for this kind of innovation while protecting the skills and the knowledge of the youth of Kenya. We do need to learn from that. We do need to then again take it to scale, either first sub-regionally in the East African community, but of course continentally, to ensure that we open the markets to everybody. So I think this is a unique opportunity for our two communities to meet, to talk about as we build forward, and we build forward sustainably in the energy sector. We're going to need some of the services of the fintech industry as we build forward sustainably in the transport and logistics sector, huge areas where we need to look at how we reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, but at the same time create jobs and create wealth. I think, again, huge experiences in Asia that we can build up of. And I hope that this is not an online one-time event, but that we have this event that continues, and we're able to see how Asian cities are doing in terms of building forward in the technology space, in the fintech space in particular, and ensuring then that Africa and Asia together are the ones who are sure that we actually do get a recovery. We can come out of this recovery. We cannot do this without financing. We're going to need a lot of resources to finance the recovery. We're going to need a lot of resources to ensure that we can empower the fintech sectors on the continent. We talked in the beginning about how much venture capital is coming into the fintech sectors on the continent. It's not nearly enough. We know that in Asia there's still now we're looking at the sort of more advanced Asian economies, Singapore, Japan, where rates of interest rates are quite low, whereas on our continent interest rates are quite high. I think an average meeting of the minds of those interest rates would allow for investments, of course, on our continents that can then ensure that we, leapfrog into this fintech and digital age much faster. So I think, again, there has to be a conversation on the financial sector side of how we bring those markets together, ensure that there is a transfer that leads to prosperity on both sides. There is jobs that are being created in Asia as well. Asia still, despite the I think stable and reliable growth that we see, still needs some more growth. And of course, on the continent, we still lack the infrastructure. So that combination of the demand and supply, I think, is a match made in heaven for both Africa and Asia that stand to be the two big powers that will power growth as we continue to work towards Agenda 2030 and get towards the end of it. Reducing poverty, increasing prosperity on both of our continents, reducing inequality in particular on both of our continents is something that is within our reach. Technology allows us to do that. COVID, with all its negative effects, I think has shown us the importance of technology, the power of technology, but also what we can achieve with technology and how fast we can do inclusion and do inclusive growth if we use technology and use it well, if we are able to develop the services in the fintech sector in particular, financial inclusion becomes something that we can do much faster. So I think this is a positive event in a time when we're hoping that as we find the vaccine, we will be able to begin to see an end to the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope that this conversation between our two continents continues, not just in the fintech area, but particularly, and I want to go back to the title of this discussion that we're having today, which is about people and talent. We're doing this because we want to ensure that we recover lives and we recover livelihoods at the end of the post-COVID-19, but that we also do that in a way that ensures and guarantees prosperity in a more resilient, in a more green, in a much, much cleaner environment. And bringing all this together, I think is something that the Afro-Asian Fintech Festival clearly will provide us with some initiatives and some ideas that we can take forward. At the Economic Commission for Africa, we will continue to work with our partners in the Central Bank of Kenya and the Ministry of ICT and the Ministry of Finance and others to see what and how we can take forward some of the ideas that come out of this conversations. Once again, I wish you all the luck as we continue this process, and look forward to hearing the good and innovative ideas that will come out of this and how we can collaborate with the Economic Commission for Africa to deliver on them. Thank you very much.